I am your host, Craig Pera, the founder of the Mindful Habit System. And today we are going to talk about shame. Shame is such a powerful driver in our lives. And when we think about the impact of shame, right? So, what happens? We get weak, we fail, we feel terrible about what we did, and we are consumed with shame. And shame is telling us, don't do it again, you worthless piece of shit. You're a failure, you're a loser, right? What is your narrative around shame? When you think of shame, what do you think about? Right, so if you were to close your eyes and try to imagine if shame was an entity, if shame was a being that you could talk to, right? What would shame look like? What would shame look like? And I invite you to do that. I invite you to close your eyes and I invite you to imagine if shame were a person or a being, what would he look like? Maybe like the shame monster in the animation Big Mouth. Many of you, when you think of your shame part, you may think disease, demonization. Um, yeah, like if a lot of people tell me when they picture their shame part, it looks like the devil. And and shame has been with us for such a very long time, right? When did we first experience shame? When did we first learn to lie about our compulsive sexual behavior? When did we first learn that lying about it was safe? And that's what we're going to do today. So let me kind of we're going to talk about the impact of shame. We're going to talk about who is this part, and we're going to reflect on where this part came from, and we're going to figure out what does this part need. And when I say parts, many of you, hopefully, if you're listening to this podcast, you're aware of parts work, voice dialogues, sub personalities, the internal family systems model. You're here, so you're learning about the mindful habit system. Important in all those modalities is parts work. Parts work has changed my life. Parts work has changed the lives of my clients for a whole bunch of different reasons. But number one, it gives us a framework to learn and understand this an aspect of our being that we hate, that we detest, that we want to kill, right? That we, like a cancer, cut it, cut it, cut it. And so it gives a framework to think about that part. So, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that today. The other thing that it does is it gives you also a framework to make practical your family of origin work, right? Your childhood stuff, why you do what you do, right? And if you're here, you have a family of origin childhood component to why you do what you do. You're lying, your ability to compartmentalize, your lack of empathy, your low self esteem. Those aspects of your being were trained. And when do we receive most of our training as humans? Is it at 50 years old where my brain is, not locked in, still neuroplastic, but it takes a lot more for me to learn a language now than it would if I was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? Our developmental years were literally how we experience reality, how we live and how we respond to conflict, to everything, right? Trained in our childhood. And so let's think about how our shame part was trained, right? So the question I invite you to ask is, let's think about, where did your shame training come from? And try to do this almost academic, right? Because there's so much energy around shame, right? So much energy around shame, and so much judgment, so much criticism, so much internal hatred, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But be the student, be the curious academic, and I'm gonna look at shame from almost a scientific perspective. And just like I'm able to, let's say you're able to do a task at work, or if you play an instrument, or if you've learned to play a game, you've been trained to play that instrument and play that game, right? If I threw a ball at your face and your hand reaches up and grabs that ball within literally almost a nanosecond, that incredible, miraculous reaction is how you were trained. The same thing is true for shame. So let's say you experience a shame moment today, right? Let's say you do something that you regret, you do something that you feel bad about. You may think something that you regret and feel bad about. And what happens? Boom, the shame part of you is awakened. The thoughts start going. You start beating yourself up. And do you feel better about yourself? No, no, of course not. You feel worse. So shame is a trained part. And where did most of that training come from? Most of that training came in our childhood. Many of my clients report religious shame, fire and brimstone, right? There were few other areas in our lives where there was so much attention. Maybe stealing, don't steal. But and we lied about that if we did that. Um, so that's one area, right? But that did not have the energy. Stealing did not have the energy that sex stuff did, right? Sex for many of us was fire and brimstone. I was raised a Catholic, and sex is dirty. It's disgusting. And you save it for someone you love. So there was that conflict. Sex was demonized, diseasified, not something to be experienced. Pleasure was bad. Self pleasure was even worse. In fact, for doing so, some of us were told that we would literally burn to death for the rest of our lives for touching ourselves. Just stop for a second. Stop for a second and reflect on the impact of that programming on a child. So, when we're asking ourselves where shame came from, well, there's one aspect of that training, right? How we were trained around sex, how we were socialized around sex. It was certainly not something that was talked about. It was a secret that we learned to keep at a very, very, very young age. So, what I invite you to do now, if you'd like, is to close your eyes, right? And think about your shame part. What does that part look like? That part of you that you hate, that part of you that you detest, that part of you that you want to kill. And so there might be an automatic, instantaneous reaction, but that image changes the more you understand shame's origin story. So, like Batman, the comic book character, has an origin story. The Joker has an origin story. Your shame monster has an origin story. And the more you understand that origin story, that darkness, that evil, that disgust, that self loathing, wait a minute. This child stuff is directly related to this monster of shame, was born in pain, was a confused child who had no one to talk to about this massive like transformation and this almost insatiable, drive and desire. There's no other area in your life where you had that much energy around it where you were unable to talk about it, for most people. Shame is a trained conditioned response. So that programming around shame, if you experience shame, I can almost guarantee that there is a family of origin component to it. And when you look at shame and you appreciate a shame from the big picture, when you not just look at this part from the lens of the dirty and disgusting and shameful things that he does and the shame that he feels about himself, you have to look at that shame part in context. And when you look at that part in context, your relationship with shame changes. And your relationship with shame has to change. It has to change because you beating yourself up, like punching yourself in the stomach, kicking yourself when you're down, literal verbal abuse. If you said to a child the same things that you say to yourself when your shame part is awakened, has taken over, they'd call CPS. It would be considered abuse. The shame part isn't helping. Now, shame is, I call the compliance arm of the organization. The old style compliance. You do it or I'm going to break your face and beat you up and rub your nose in it if you don't do it. Okay? You do it. Don't do the filthy things. You do the filthy things, I beat you up. That's the encouragement that shame offers. Don't do it, so you're not a piece of shit. If you do it, you're a piece of shit. For thinking about doing it, you're a piece of shit. And even if you don't do it, I'm probably going to beat you up over that too, because you're thinking about it. So it's an enforcement. It's a compliance mechanism. But guess what? You know this, right? Please think. Is it making things better? Is that shame monster driving compliance? Are you creating outcomes that are adding value to your life, that are making your life better? Or is the shame piece of you a festering, oozing wound that literally is a reflection of how you feel about yourself and is literally ground zero, where you instead of condemnation, shame, abuse, self-loathing and disgust, what is necessary is love, self-compassion, self-esteem. Yes, I'm telling you that I invite you to practice loving shame. Because when you understand not just the outcome that shame produces, but when you understand the job that shame is trying to do, when you understand the role that shame has and how shame was trained and where shame came from, well, that demonization, diseasification, punishment not only is it making things worse, well, no, that's it. It's making things worse. So that compliance arm of our parts, the different parts of us that make us who we are, isn't making things better. If it was making things better, I'd be doing a video about let's create some more shame. Spend some time journaling about a worthless piece of crap that you are. Come on, let's go. You're worse than that. Come on, you know when you close your eyes and go to sleep at night who you see. You know how you feel when you look in the mirror and look at yourself in the eye and you feel that shame. That's the part of you that needs love. That's the part of you that needs empathy, kindness, compassion. Why? Because look at where he came from. Look at where he came from. That, and it's not working. It's not working. It's making things worse. It's making things worse. So if you're not doing parts work, read about it. Get the book, No Bad Parts by Dr. Richard Schwartz. If you are completely unfamiliar with the concept, if you are looking to hit this stuff hard and have a framework to change your relationship with these parts, go on the website, check out our core training program. Right now it's December 1st. I'm running those weekly webinars. Normally, one of my coaches is doing it. I wanted to take it over because I want to make it better. I want to use the framework of the call to drive accountability, to create some community, and to give you a framework to not only create a transformative experience, but also to build sustainability. Anyway, for listeners of this podcast only, if you use the coupon code podcast, you will get a very, very deep discount. In fact, it's the deepest discount that we offer on that program, except for vets. Sometimes we go to 50% discount on the core training program. So anyway, check that out. Get the book, watch some YouTube videos about it, and think about, like, don't let this opportunity pass you by after listening to this event for 15 minutes. Spend some time picturing shame. Like, close your eyes, put the child's, put the letting the cat out of the bag aside for a second, because we've talked about where shame came from, but really try to bring yourself into one of those moments where, man, you just beat yourself up and slapped yourself around because you made a mistake. And please don't, in this, only do this if this feels right for you, if it's consistent with your therapy and your practice. These are, guidelines, questions to think about if they might work for you. My probably some of the most important, no, definitely the most important work that I've done is changing my relationships with my addict part, with my liar part, with my shame part, with my piece of shit critic part. They don't go away. And any of you men who've done therapy and coaching, whatever you've done, and you've had that big transformative experience, right? Some of you guys have been there, right? You go do the work, you have these big moments, and maybe you realize something about your childhood, maybe you forgive yourself, you let some burdens down, you put them down, and it feels like the scene in the Shawshank Redemption movie. His arms are outstretched after climbing through the tunnel of shit, and the water's cleansing him, right? If you haven't had one of those moments, then roll up your sleeves, man, because they are awesome. Here's the challenge with those moments. And men who've done therapy, right? You tell me if I'm right. You're listening to this podcast. Maybe you're in sustainability mode, but what have we learned is those moments fade. That awareness fades, and we feel, at least I felt, even more shame because I had this moment. I had this big cathartic moment, and that should have meant that I was better. I shouldn't have these problems anymore. I shouldn't be having these thoughts anymore. Then I feel shame, even more shame, after having that beautiful, cathartic, cleansing experience. But it's like taking a shower. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to jump back in there and freshen up every day, every few days, depending upon your style or where in the world you live. I thought that those big cathartic moments meant I was better, and they do not. Because what would happen, my shame part would awaken. Aha, I'm not as far as long as I'd like. I am a worthless piece of shit. This fuck it guy takes over, and boom, do something that I don't want to do. So what you get with parts work is a framework to manage, to lead, to practice self leadership, to a framework to learn how to change your relationship with these parts. To listen, how you feel about a part is how you feel about yourself. How you feel about a part is how you feel about yourself. How you and you will always lose in a fight against yourself. Those are two lessons that I've learned over the years. So I invite you to continue your journey in changing your relationship with pain, shame, pain too. This applies to pain, by the way, physical pain and mental pain. We'll save that for another podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you need any more help, visit themindfulhabit.com. My name is Craig Paris, signing off. Embrace your power of choice and feed the right wolf. Thank you for listening.